Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome from Apollo Hospitals, Bangalore. Today we have two of our eminent doctors who are going to talk on fits and epilepsies, the emergencies related to these two. So I would like to first introduce our surgeon, neurosurgeon, Dr. Arun Nayak. Welcome, sir. I also would like to introduce Dr. Suryanarayan Sharma, our neurologist. Welcome, sir. So, without taking much of your time, I'd like to directly hand it over to the doctors to start with the topic and enlighten us on this particular topics and help us understand this better. Over to you, doctor.
Thanks, Pawan. Good afternoon, friends. So today we are here in front of you with a very important topic for discussion, that is fits and epilepsy in neurological practice. And this is very relevant, especially during this lockdown period, coronavirus, because these neurological emergencies have suddenly increased in incidence. On a daily basis, we are seeing more number of cases coming to the emergency department with various neurological emergencies. So we thought, why not take this opportunity to enlighten our viewers about the neurological emergencies, how they present, what to do in case of such emergencies. Because we all know that those neurological emergencies, whether it is fits, whether it is loss of consciousness or a fall, it will be either at the workplace or at home. So if you are at home and if such a thing happens, so what to do, where to seek help, and what as a family member you can do at home without harming the person. So let's discuss all these issues in this program. So first I would like to just introduce to you what is the neurological emergencies, how they come to the hospital with emergencies. Friends, the neurological emergencies are very dramatic because the person will be normal, he will be talking or maybe working, and suddenly they will lose consciousness, or before losing consciousness, they may get what is called as fits or seizures or epilepsy. These seizures are nothing but sudden jerky movements which you can actually witness in them, with an uprolling of eyeballs, maybe a tongue bite, and lapsing into unconscious status. So this we all know that the how these seizures or fits come. But it is only a manifestation of what is happening inside, friends. Because these fits or epilepsies is the commonest presentation of neurological problems. Now, to get into this, the whole gamut of why this epilepsy or fits happens is basically because during this sudden problem inside the brain, whether it is a stroke or whether it is some neurological problems happening inside, so what happens, there will be a surge of electrical activity happening inside the brain, that is the cortex, where the sudden problems will happen and they are manifested as fits. Okay, now I will ask Dr. Suryanarayan Sharma, who is our neurologist, to take us forward and to tell you, as a family member, what you can do when someone has fits in your family or in your workplace. Dr. Sharma.
Yeah, good afternoon. Namaste. Uh, as Dr. Arun explained, neurological emergencies are on the surge, especially even in the lockdown period. And in Apollo hospitals or in most of the hospitals, we are coming across with lot of cases. At least every day, we are coming with 2 to 3 cases of acute neurological emergency. And common neurological emergencies include stroke, epilepsy, brain fever, that is meningitis, unconsciousness due to any cause. So the fits or the epilepsy can occur at home or at our workplace. So what you should do as an individual, suppose a patient suddenly falls, they may be working or they may be sitting, and suddenly you can see the changes in their face. They can start sweating. They can have an absent or a stared look or a dazed look, and sometimes they fall unconscious. So then what you should do as a this one is don't panic. First thing is ensure that the patient or the person who is having fits is on the floor, lying down on the floor. Make sure there are no sharp objects near to him because that can cause injury. And you turn the patient to the lateral position, either left lateral or right lateral position. And if the patient is usually what happens is if the patient is having seizure, they start with the head rolling, like they start with the turning of the head, and subsequently they have this jerky movements, the what we call it is generalized tonic-clonic seizures. So then the commonest thing what they have is the tongue bite. Usually if the tongue is protruded out in between the teeth like this, so there is a risk of having tongue bite. So the best thing to avoid is in the early phase either use a handkerchief or a soft towel and put it between the teeth. Please don't push it inside and suffocate him. Just it's just in the tip of the mouth, and don't put your finger to separate the teeth because the contractions are so strong, and they are very strong that even your finger can be bitten badly. So then subsequently turn the patient to one side and do not restrict the movements. They may be having a jerky movement, but don't try to stop it because the moment you stop it, sometimes they can have shoulder dislocation, shoulder fracture. Usually, luckily or fortunately for a patient, any generalized tonic-clonic fit lasts for 30 seconds to 108 seconds. So after that, usually it doesn't come unless the patient is having a status epilepticus, which is an emergency. Usually this gets subsided in 30 seconds to 45 seconds, and subsequently patients will go into a state of deep sleep for next 5 to 10 minutes. They'll be snoring like this. So you just allow the patient to relax and call for help. If there is a one attack of fit, usually 15 to 20 minutes later patients get up and they become totally normal neurologically. But that depends, as Dr. Arun said, why it has happened, what is the etiology of fit. Based upon that, this the recovery depends. So as I said, turn the patient to one side, try to protect the tongue from being bitten, don't restrict the movements, and within 30 seconds to 45 seconds usually these volatile violent movements stop. And subsequently once patient goes into the post ictal phase, that is after the fits they go into a state of a deep sleep which may last for 5 to 15 minutes, just allow them to relax, and by then please reach out for a medical help.
Yes, friends, so you know now the first and foremost is to shift or just carry the patient to an area where it is very safe for him so that he will not injure. Dr. Sharma, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
It's always it's in the mind of people that somebody is having seizures. They will run and search for a bunch of keys or a key bunch or some metallic object, and then they give it to the hand of the patient. So, what are your comments on this practice?
So usually giving some sharp objects like either a iron object or a steel object that doesn't have any scientific evidence. As of now, please avoid giving any sharp objects, either key or knife, or I've seen some patients even being hurt with a knife being given because that time it was available there. So please do not give anything to the hand of the patient. So whether you give anything or not, these contractions are going to stop. It is like a electrical firing activity in the brain. At some point of the time it has to stop, and it will stop. So please do not intentionally hurt your patient by giving either a key or key bunch or whatever sharp object.
Yes. And another very important thing is that, if someone has having a seizure, so the practice is to immediately reach out for a bottle of water and coming and trying to open the mouth and pour the water into the mouth. So friends, be careful because this practice is dangerous because the patients will not be conscious, and putting the water into the mouth you may choke the person. So please refrain from putting any kind of water or any kind of a food into the mouth of the person because it may suffocate them. So now once you have witnessed the seizure, and then the seizure is now, let's say the person is now slowly getting into consciousness. So next question is what to do now. So, Dr. Sharma, what do you think that now the person's attender should do now? Because the seizure is now gone, subsided, and now he's slowly getting into consciousness. What do the family members need to do now?
See, now once the fits is over, now the patient is in a recovery phase. Maybe 5 to 15 minutes he is going to get up. So now what you are going to do? Number one, we have to identify why it has happened. So the simple technique what you can do is, more if the patient is diabetic, most of the families will have a glucometer at house. So please take the glucometer, check a random blood sugar at that point of time, because low sugar related fits is very common and it is completely treatable and curable. Do that first. Second thing, please ensure that patient is not gasping, which means suppose he has been choked or some item is there in the mouth. Please ensure open the mouth. By then the contractions have subsided. Now the patient is like totally lax and flabby. Just ensure that there is nothing in the mouth to choke him. These two you ensure that you do it immediately. Then just try to check the pulse of the patient. Just ensure that his breathing, his circulation is intact. And usually, as I said earlier, if it is only one fit, like a single fit, within 10 to 15 minutes they try to get up. On the other hand, suppose if fits has happened because of a stroke or a brain tumor or any other condition, it doesn't subside at that point of time. Then you need to shift the patient immediately to the hospital. So once patient gets up from the consciousness, please ask him to lift the hand, both the hands. So suppose if he is able to lift both the hands and keep it at this position for at least 10 seconds, at least it will rule out a significant weakness in the body, which means like it may be a stroke or something. And it also helps us to see that there is no significant shoulder dislocation or any fracture in the hand because of that. And I think that Arun will come to the etiology, how it has happened. So these 2-3 important things I think you have to look, and they are all very simple, straightforward, and that will help the patient in a significant way.
Absolutely. Now, friends, see, if the person has had seizures in the past, so then the solution is very simple. You know what the medications is being prescribed for the patient. So make sure that once the patient is fully conscious, first thing you need to do is give his medications which he has missed. I'm talking about the fits medicine or an epilepsy medicine which has been given. The person who was having seizures known before and who had skipped the medications and then having seizures. But then there are scenarios where that is the first fit in somebody's life, friends. So what you need to do is, any fits first time in life, especially after the age of 30, you should never neglect. Like, you need to see the doctor, but don't postpone it unnecessarily. So if possible, try to get the help on the same day, and just get into a center where neurologist or neurosurgeon or a neurological practice is available. So please go and seek attention immediately. As I said earlier, fits or seizures or epilepsy is only a manifestation of something happening inside the brain. So reasons may be multiple. We are going to discuss regarding the reasons for the seizures, but make sure that you reach the hospital in a reasonable amount of time. So, Dr. Sharma, let's discuss the common reasons for seizures. You can start.
Yeah. Now the common reasons of the seizures depends on, number one, age of the patient. Number two, the other comorbidities what they have. If you see the age of the patient, we have seen fits in a 3-day-old born baby till 100 years old elderly patient. So the reasons for fits vary from patient to patient. If it's a young onset, suppose if it happens in a childhood or an infant or a neonate, usually we consider genetic causes, number one. Second thing is we call it as febrile seizure, fever related seizure, or it can be manifestation of some abnormality in, we call it as inborn errors of metabolism. Some of the toxic materials get accumulated in the body and cause fit. Let's focus on the adult type of fits. In adult type of fits, we have various reasons to cause a fit. The most common as we come across is, number one is stroke. Patients can have a stroke which can present with seizure. Number two, the most important and most life-threatening is a possibility of a brain tumor or a brain infection. Brain infection can be tuberculosis, it can be, we call it as neurocysticercosis, the worm infection of the brain, or any other infections of the brain. And third thing is if there is any bleeding into the brain. Suppose we call it as subdural hematoma. I think Dr. Arun will throw more light on that later. So subdural hematoma, patient may have had fallen few days back to few weeks ago, and they present with reduced sensorium and fits. So and other metabolic conditions, as I said, diabetes most important. Patient can have a kidney failure, they can have low sodium in the body. Low sodium is one of the most important cause of fit. The infection anywhere in the body can present with fits. Sometimes the toxic inhalation, sometimes some of the poisonous gases, suppose if you inhale poisonous gases at workplace, and injury, head injury and road traffic accidents are very common type of very common cause of fits. So please do not forget at least 3 or 4 things. Number one, stroke. Number two, brain tumors. Number three, brain infection. Number four, diabetes, low sodium, that is hyponatremia, and other metabolic conditions like kidney problem. Because there is a definite treatment for these things, and patient can lead a normal life.
Absolutely. So, friends, the any seizure happening in adulthood, you should never neglect. So we know that Dr. Sharma has just mentioned about this. Now, one of the commonest cause of seizures in adulthood is a diagnosis of a brain tumor. So, what is brain tumor? We all know that tumor is basically a growth. So, this tumor can happen anywhere in the body. So, similarly, tumor happening inside the brain, it can present like a case of a seizure or epilepsy or a fits. So, nothing to worry, friends, because first and foremost is the getting a brain imaging done. An MRI of the brain will give you the answers what all is needed for the family as for the doctors also. So we'll come to know what exactly is the diagnosis, if at all if there is a brain tumor, where is the brain tumor situated, what is the kind of a brain tumor, and we can elaborate on the treatment modalities later to the family. Second most important thing, as Dr. Sharma said, is brain hemorrhage happening. Now the brain hemorrhage is nothing but bleeding happening inside the brain. So bleeding happening inside the brain, the commonest cause is a rupture of an artery which supplies the brain. So this brain artery, when it gets ruptured, the blood gets accumulated inside the brain. This we call it as brain hemorrhage, or intracerebral hematoma it is also called medically. So what happens? Suddenly, along with the seizures, patient also will have sudden severe headache. The headache will be so severe that they say that this is the worst headache of my life. Very important. Second, recurrent or repeated vomitings happening. Recurrent vomitings happening soon after the headache, and they may have many other neurological manifestations, like they may have weakness of one side of the body, they may lose their consciousness and become unconscious, or their speech may be affected, or their vision may be affected in one eye. So various manifestation of brain hemorrhage is known. So once you know that there is a problem inside the brain, we can start remedial measures. Now, Dr. Sharma, let's get into, now we know that what is the presentation of seizures. Now also we know that what to do at home, and then the patient has come to the hospital, and we have also told our viewers that what are the commonest causes of seizures. I wanted to ask you a very important question, Dr. Sharma, especially during this coronavirus time. And it is a well-known fact that during coronavirus infection, in the coronavirus setting, the people who are infected with the coronavirus, the stroke is a manifestation of coronavirus disease. Yes, friends. So it may not be, you may not be knowing about this, but it is established in various countries where the coronavirus is hit before us. It is well known that stroke is the presentation of coronavirus infection. Dr. Sharma, I want your response on this.
Yeah, definitely. Now during this coronavirus pandemic, stroke is a very important and very serious manifestation of coronavirus disease. Coronavirus disease, as you know, it can affect every organ in the body. Most common presentation being a lung infection that we call it as SARI, that is severe acute respiratory illness or influenza-like illness. But at the same time, we should not ignore that patient can present with stroke, patient can present with fits. So, suppose if a patient presents to the hospital with a stroke, so most of the hospitals, the bigger hospitals are all COVID ready and stroke ready hospitals. So they follow the standard COVID safety measures to the patient. The moment the patient comes to the hospital, they will take a history, they will take some of the important things, and if there is a suspicion, they swab the patient. And subsequently, the moment the patient we diagnose stroke, we do some of the scales, we call it as NIHSS stroke scale, where we assess the severity of stroke, and after checking all the vitals and taking ECG and getting a cardiologist evaluation, we shift the patient immediately to the MRI. There is something called golden hour of stroke. First 4.5 hours in acute stroke setting is called as golden hour, wherein if you bring the patient to the hospital within that time, we can do advanced stroke intervention and we can minimize the weakness. There are situations wherein patients have come totally in a paralyzed state, and after the advanced stroke intervention, maybe 5 to 7 days, they have walked home. So don't ignore your stroke symptoms, don't ignore your seizure symptom just because it is the lockdown and you are unable to reach to help. You can contact our hospital helpline anytime 24/7. Our neurology last 40 days, if you see the global lockdown period, actually the stroke incidence has increased by 20%, I would say. It's our personal experience in our hospital. Our stroke numbers have gone up by 20%. But all the patients have received adequate treatment. At the we also have initiated all the safety measures. It is not that we are ignoring the safety measures. Till now, we are yet to see any COVID with stroke. But because our counterparts in Spain, our counterparts in Italy, our counterparts in US, they have all seen stroke and they have formulated the guidelines. So we are all following the American Stroke Association guidelines on treating stroke in a COVID pandemic period. So please do not panic. First thing is, if there is any symptom of stroke, please visit the hospital immediately.
Very good, Dr. Sharma. So, friends, there are few manifestations of stroke which you can detect at home. So, we neurologists and neurosurgeons, we educate our society regarding this. So, first and foremost is, as Dr. Sharma was saying, that manifestation can be anything. So, in that, Dr. Sharma, can you please tell our viewers how to recognize the symptoms of stroke for a non-doctor,
Yeah.
a lay person, as a family member? How can they say that this person is having a probable stroke?
Yeah, we go by what is called FAST strategy, FAST, FAST strategy. So F means face. You ask the patient to clench the teeth or show the teeth or make a smile. So do this. So they are unable, there is no asymmetry. Both sides are similar. If there is a stroke or paralysis, one side there is a asymmetry of the face. Usually the angle of the mouth gets dragged to the one side. That is one symptom of stroke. We call it as F. Second thing, as I showed earlier, arm weakness, arm or even leg weakness. So if there is total paralysis, it's quite evident that he is even unable to lift the hand. You ask the patient to lift the hand or lift the leg. If they are unable to do that, then you are fairly convinced that it's a possible case of paralysis. But in milder cases, still they are able to lift the hand. In that situation, what we do is we call it as arm drift. So you just ask the patient to keep in this position as I am showing for at least 10 seconds. You ask them to keep it in this position for 10 seconds. Any normal individual will be able to do this. But if there is a stroke, suppose if my left hand is paralyzed, so I cannot hold it for 10 seconds, so it drops like this. So that is another evidence that there may be a stroke. Third thing is yes. Yes means speech disturbance. Suppose if the patient, you just ask them to make a meaningful sentence. You just ask their name. Suppose they say their name. You ask their address, or you ask for their family or where they are coming from. If they are able to make a meaningful conversation, then their speech is normal. If they are unable to do that, if there is a slurring of speech, or if they are not able to understand what you are talking, or if they are totally mute, then that could be a symptom of stroke. Then last, T stands for time. Time is brain. Please remember, in brain contains 100 billion neurons. every minute after stroke, we see that 1.9 million neurons are dying every minute. So every minute after acute stroke is very important. And apart from this FAST strategy, T is time for brain, again time to call ambulance. So please note down the exact time at which patient had a stroke. So stroke comes out of the blue, which means patient is normal now and next moment he has a paralysis. So you can exactly tell what is the time of onset, and please ensure that they reach the hospital within 4.5 hours, because that is the time when we have the maximum ability to reverse the stroke symptom.
Absolutely. Friends, FAST, fast. In this, the most important thing is time. Time is brain, and the time to act is very, very important. So, as soon as possible, try to reach out to a hospital where all the facilities are available. Friends, why I'm saying like this is that because we sitting at a super specialty hospitals, many a times stroke patients are referred to a situation or a setup where neurologist or a neurosurgery facilities are not there. Forget about neurologist or neurosurgery facilities. Even imaging modalities like a plain CT scan and a MRI also is not there. So what happens to the patients? Like patients are admitted in a hospital where there is no neurological facilities. Then they have to be transported to another center for a CT scan or an MRI. And then the patient comes back to the smaller hospital, and the report of the CT scan and MRI will come after 2 hours, and by this time it is evening, and then by evening the doctors will come to know that yes, there is a stroke, and then they will try to reach out to a neurologist and neurosurgeon. By the time neurologist or a neurosurgeon comes and sees the patient, you are losing about 5-6 hours. 5-6 hours for brain, friends, is a difference between life and death. So that's why we say always, please shift to a patient. If at all, if you are seeing that the person is having a stroke, Dr. Sharma has already told what are the symptoms. And as a family member, as a colleague, if you happen to see any one of them with a suspicion of stroke, please shift them immediately to a center where stroke facilities are available. So now once the patient comes to us, what we do as neuroscientists is that we do a complete neurological examination of the patient. Like we see like what are the deficits, what are the problems, what are the paralysis patient has, and soon after that we, without wasting time, we immediately do a brain imaging. So what we do is all stroke ready hospitals, what we do is we immediately get an MRI scan done to rule out what kind of a stroke it is. Suppose on the MRI, if you say, if we see that there is a stroke, basically stroke is nothing but the interruption or a blockage of one of the arteries supplying the brain. So what happens? The brain gets no blood supply. So the brain dies. As Dr. Sharma was saying, every minute you are losing millions of nerve cells. So the brain death is most dangerous thing. So we need to act immediately once you get the diagnosis. In stroke ready hospitals, friends, MRI is gotten within minutes. Like there is what is called as a stroke protocol. The moment the patient is arrived in the emergency, the stroke protocol is triggered. It's nothing but informing everyone who is involved, whether it is an MRI technician, whether it is a nurse, whether it is a pharmacist, to get the medications ready, whether it is to involve everyone who's involved. Within minutes, every one of us will be personally present in the emergency room to handle this situation, because stroke is a medical emergency and we have to start the treatment immediately. So Dr. Sharma will tell now what is called as stroke intervention, whether it is medical intervention, whether it is a cath lab intervention. Dr. Sharma is going to tell you what we do for stroke. Dr. Sharma.
Yeah, thank you. As Dr. Arun said, first thing you should go is to a stroke ready hospital. So, what is a stroke ready hospital? A stroke ready hospital should have a 24 hours running emergency department. It should have a 24 bar 7 running ICU, operation theater, and it should be handled by a senior anesthetist or a senior intensivist. And most importantly, it should be under the guidance of a neurologist or a neurosurgeon. and it should have a minimum CT scan facility. Why Dr. Arun was insisting on reaching to stroke ready hospital is, so we have seen that 30 minutes is the minimum time delay. If you go to a hospital and they say that you have a stroke, we don't have a facility, you go to other hospital. So even just to shift the patient out of ambulance into ambulance and just to check the patient takes 30 minutes. So in Bangalore or in various other cities, both neurologists and neurosurgeons are doing awareness drives just to motivate the patient about the concept of stroke ready hospital. Now yes, the patient has arrived at our emergency department. The time starts from that point, that time it is T0. So our main thing is within 1 hour of arrival at the emergency room, patient should be treated for acute stroke. So what we do is first 10 minutes is emergency room doctor's response. So they admit the patient immediately. They do the basic, vitals checking, basic assessment, and checking sugars and other thing, doing the ECG and other thing. Then they escalate to the neurology or stroke team. Stroke team contains a neurologist, neurosurgeon, anesthetist, a radiologist, interventional radiologist, and other supportive staff. We have stroke nurses and other people who support us 24/7. Within 15 minutes, the stroke team will be activated, and once the assessment is done, see, assessment is not like a detailed examination which runs for minutes to hours. We have standard protocols, we have standard scales, what to see, what not to see. It can be done within 4 to 5 minutes, and then subsequently we draw the blood tests for sending, just to check if there is any clotting ability and all that, and then patient will be shifted to either a CT or MRI. CT scan is, both are equally good, but if you have MRI, it's always better, because many times you don't know what is the time of onset of stroke. MRI will tell us better about that. Suppose if we do MRI, we, as Dr. Arun mentioned, there is a stroke protocol. It get MRI, routine MRI, full study takes 30 to 40 minutes. But here we have simplified it so easily that in 8 minutes the MRI stroke protocol is over, which means you get a, we do various sequences to see if there is acute stroke, that is called diffusion sequence. Then we see if there are old strokes, that is called flare sequence, and we see if there is any bleeding in the brain, that is called GRE sequence, and we do a angiogram of the brain if there is any major blood vessel blockage. Suppose within 45 minutes, the timeline says that within 45 minutes the MRI has to be done and it has to be interpreted by the radiologist. So now we give 5 to 10 minutes time for the relatives to discuss about the options, whether to do a IV thrombolysis, which is the medical stroke clot busting agent, and or we go for a brain angiogram and angioplasty. Suppose in smaller vessel occlusion, or if the patient presents within 3 hours, so what we do is called as the stroke IV stroke thrombolysis. This is a clot busting medicine. There are 2-3 medicines available approved worldwide. So after getting the blood test done, within 1 hour we have to give this injection. So the injection, there is one medicine called Altiplase which goes for 1 hour, or there is a tenecteplase which is a IV bolus push injection which can be given in a matter of 15 seconds to 30 seconds. And once these injections are done, so we observe the patient. We check the blood pressure so that there is no sudden surge in the blood pressure. And by then cardiologist would have seen and they would have ruled out a heart attack. Because stroke and heart attack both are very common. There are situations where patient have heart attack and immediately after that they would have had a stroke. And once this is done, so we do a repeat CT scan. At that time we do what is called as a CT angiogram of the brain. So please remember there are two major blood vessels which supply the brain. We call it as carotid arteries in front of the neck. So that supply 40% each blood to the brain. There are two blood vessels in the back side, that is called vertebral artery, which supply 20% each. So inside the brain there are multiple blood vessels, multiple channels which form a circle. We call it a circle of Willis, which anastomose. So that it's a nature's protection. If one blood vessel is weak, automatically brain doesn't suffer injury. So suppose if there is a angiogram shows a clot inside one of the major blood vessels in the brain, so we take the patient to a cath lab. Our interventional neuroradiologist or interventionist will do a angiogram of the brain, and we identify the location of the clot, we identify the severity of the clot, and then what we call it, we do a mechanical thrombectomy, wherein we are going to pass a guide wire. It is exactly like the heart angioplasty. the brain angioplasty, but brain angioplasty is more complex, more complicated. It requires more expertise, but results are equally good. So once you do the brain angioplasty, you remove the clot, you establish the circulation. If you feel the removal of the clot itself is enough, that's fine. Otherwise, many a time we have to put a stent. After 24 hours of doing the angioplasty, we repeat a MRI not to miss any bleeding in the brain, and subsequently patients do well. So we have been doing these type of procedures regularly, and with confidence we can say that any acute stroke, whether it's mechanical thrombectomy, that is the angioplasty, or IV stroke thrombolysis, the results are really good. I think every patient, whoever deserves, irrespective of the financial status, should undergo this procedure, because long-term disability is very, troublesome in acute stroke.
Very true. At Apollo Institute of Neurosciences, across Apollo hospitals, all our hospitals are stroke-ready hospitals, friends. So as Dr. Sharma said, two important interventions are non-surgical and very simple there. One is thrombolysis and the second one is interventional procedures like thrombectomy and stent insertion to establish the blood supply again. Friends, but if sometimes what happens, the patients present lately, maybe after a day, maybe 2 days later, what happens inside the dead brain starts swelling inside. So once that happens, what happens slowly, the patient becomes unconscious, they'll get paralyzed and they become comatose. So that is the time when many patients do present to us, and what we need to do during that time is most of the times we will get the imaging done, and many a times direct interventions like thrombolysis or thrombectomy or intervention may not be possible, because if somebody is coming after 24 hours. Sometimes when the pressure inside the brain is more, there is a swelling inside the brain is more because of the stroke, many a times we surgeons have to intervene and we need to do a surgical procedure to reduce the swelling inside the brain. So we call it as a decompressive craniectomy. This is an emergency procedure, very simple procedure, wherein what we do is we remove the part of the skull and we create space for the brain inside, because the stroke causes swelling of the brain, and because there is a rigid skull all around, if the swelling inside becomes more, patient will die because of the raised intracranial pressure. So decompressive craniectomy is a life-saving procedure which can be done within an hour or so. It is a simple, straightforward surgery, but it is a life-saving surgery wherein we remove the skull cap and then we manage the patient. After about 2 months or so, once everything is settled, we call the patient back and we replace this bone flap, which we have kept it in the freezer, and we send them in about a day's time. So this is in essence what we do for acute strokes. But friends, there is another kind of a stroke which we were discussing earlier. So that's called as a brain hemorrhage. So in brain hemorrhage, what happens? Bleeding happens inside the brain within a rapid pace, and the patient loses consciousness or he may have a seizures or something like that. So what we need to do is, in this case also, as Dr. Sharma was mentioning, we will get a radiology imaging, whether it is an MRI or a CT scan. Once the diagnosis of a brain hemorrhage is done, the management of the ischemic stroke, which we were discussing now, which is because of the interruption of the blood supply. But here in brain hemorrhage, it is the opposite. In brain hemorrhage, it is the bleeding, excess bleeding happening. So here we need to arrest the bleeding immediately. Otherwise, there may be very, very dangerous consequences, including death. So what we do is, in brain hemorrhage, if the hemorrhage is very severe, patient is losing consciousness, becoming more paralytic, then we may have to do various surgical procedures. In that, I would like to just say a couple of surgical procedures which we do. In one of the instances, what happens is one of the brain arteries will rupture. Why it ruptures? Because there will be a pre-existing balloon-like dilatation or balloon-like swelling on the arteries, brain. So whenever somebody's blood pressure increases or something, or during the stress, this abnormal blood pressure will rupture the artery, and then there will be a huge bleeding inside the brain. This we call it as a subarachnoid hemorrhage. This subarachnoid hemorrhage is very lethal. Many a times, more than 50% of the subarachnoid hemorrhage people, they don't even reach the hospital, because that is one of the commonest cause of sudden death other than heart attack. So once these patients come to us, we may have to do what is called as aneurysm securing, means we have to repair this aneurysm or a ruptured blood vessel. So we have 2-3 techniques to do that. So in that, we surgeons, what we do is we need to do a craniotomy, that is a normal brain surgery. We need to go inside the brain and we need to see where the blood vessel is ruptured, and we need to put a clip to obliterate that bleeding. So this procedure is called as surgical clipping of an aneurysm, which is an emergency procedure which we do it on a daily basis whenever the patient comes to us. And this is an emergency procedure wherein, as a life-saving attempt, we arrest this bleeding so that the patient can be saved on time. So this is a couple of surgical interventions which we do. Now, Pawan, do we have any questions now?
So we had 3 questions. One has been already answered.
Okay.
So the Mr. Prasad had asked about use of key and iron
Yes.
into the hands of a person, victim.
Yes.
So you have already answered that.
Yes.
We have 2 more questions from Mr. Padma Prakash.
Okay.
The first is, does eucalyptus oil cause seizures in elderly?
Okay, Mrs. Padma,
Yeah.
Dr. Sharma will answer this question. Very
Yeah.
relevant question.
Definitely now, because of the concentration of the eucalyptus oil, there are multiple papers. One more paper from our colleague here, Dr. Vikram Kamath himself, has published a paper on eucalyptus oil triggered seizures. So any increased inhalation of these aromatic substances in high concentration will definitely trigger a fit. There are 2 ways of looking at it. Number one, by per se, the high dose inhalation of eucalyptus oil can cause a trigger a fit. Or second thing, in a patient with already a fits, so if they apply eucalyptus oil or even the Vicks or Amrutanjan for a routine headache, that itself can trigger a seizure. So definitely do not over use eucalyptus oil in high concentration. Actually now the Epileptologist Association is also formulating guidelines, and they are submitting to the government against use of these eucalyptus oils in higher concentration. Please do not, especially applying on the head, forehead, or direct inhalation, please try to avoid. Yes.
Absolutely. Even inhalation of substances like petrol,
Yeah.
or a diesel or a kerosene oil can also cause seizures,
seizures.
and this is one of the triggers for seizures. Thanks, Padma, for asking this question.
So one more question from Mr. Padma. Seizures cause electrolytes imbalance.
Yeah,
So
that's what I was
Okay, yeah.
initially. I think I discussed that. Most important electrolytes, if you see in the body, are sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium, chloride. Sodium and calcium disturbance. If there is a low sodium, hyponatremia we call. If there is high sodium, there is hypernatremia. Both of them can cause fits. Low calcium, there is hypocalcemia. It can cause fits. So why these variations happen? Commonly is because one is because of the renal failure, kidney diseases. If there is the kidneys are unable to hold back sodium and potassium. If they are unable to hold back sodium and calcium, so these is known to happen. So it's a rule in every hospital. If patient present with fits, we do sodium, we do potassium, we do calcium as a blood test at the baseline. Suppose if there is abnormality, then we treat it immediately. Yesterday only I had 2 patients who got admitted. Normal sodium for general information is 135 to 145. Yesterday one lady had 112 sodium and she is in ICU. So now, because after the treatment she is recovering. So yes, your question is very valid. Electrolytes are very, it's a treatable. Why we focus on that? Because they are all completely treatable conditions. Why Dr. Arun is highlighting upon some of the brain tumors, some of the bleeds? Because if you identify that and treat that, most of the patients lead a near normal life. That's important. The quality of life after treatment is more important. That's why we insist. The awareness program is largely to bring back patient to normalcy. That's the goal of any treatment.
And this electrolyte-induced seizures is very common in elderly people.
Yes.
So 70s and 80s, it's very common because their metabolism of sodium will be really deranged in such people.
And another thing is most of them stay alone nowadays. So either alone or in some of the orphanages wherein there are no sufficient support, and sometimes they may not be even noticed. I have seen patients who cook themselves for months to years. There is nobody at home. Suppose even if they have some problem, next day morning somebody breaks open the door and identifies that patient is unconscious. Many a time a simple low sugar, low sodium, that itself may be the real cause.
Yes.
So if you treat them, they walk home. If you don't address them properly, they may be dead in next few hours. So that's a very valid question. Yeah.
Especially in elderly, even one simple thing like one vomiting or one diarrhea, one severe diarrhea or a dysentery is enough to bring down the sodium down and make them unconscious. So we need to keep this thing in mind, especially elderly with other pre-morbid conditions like diabetes or kidney disease. Very, very important. Yes,
So the
Pawan?
next question is from Miss Usha Shripal.
Yes.
Sir, is this hereditary? The epilepsy and fits.
Yeah, definitely. As I said, the age group of the patients, there are many conditions, many epileptic conditions which are hereditary. So I wouldn't go into the technical details or a scientific content of that, but definitely, if one of the parent is having epilepsy, then there is a high chance that the child may have epileptic attack. But please do not have this as a stigma, because most of the epilepsies are treatable. At least I would say 90% of the patients with epilepsy, we have treatment now. We have very good medicines now. It is not like 20 years or 30 years back where there were medicines but they had lot of side effects. Significant, we could call it as brain dysfunction. But now, last 15 to 20 years, there has been so much of research in epileptology that most of the seizures are treatable and curable. But as your question says, because it's hereditary condition, we always be very careful, especially with pregnant women, because if a woman is in childbearing age group, we always look at epilepsy as one potential possibility, because we want to minimize the risk to the fetus, because now some medicines are available which are safe to the pregnant woman. And we actually, I think Dr. Arun also agrees with me, every month at least I and Dr. Arun have at least 5 or 6 pregnant women with fits. So we can definitely help the patient. Of course, the treatment is individualistic and recovery is also very well established. But what I would say is, it is hereditary. Please have a caution in mind. Don't get scared. At the same time, do not socially isolate these patients with epilepsy. That's very important.
Very, very true.
So now the next question is from Miss Swati Negi. She is thanking for the session, first of all, and secondly, she is sharing a concern about her sister's son. He is studying in class 10, and he is suffering from fits. And her question is, should he allow him to study? The doctor has asked him to rest.
Miss Swati, your sister's son is 10 years old and
Class 10, so student of 10.
student of 10. Yeah, so he's 15, 16 years old. So he is having seizures for a long time. So I don't see any reason for anyone to stop their education. I don't think so. Unless the seizures are so severe that someone is having, 6 or 7 medications and you are getting about a dozen of fits every day, and where the, learning disability and such things will come. I don't think any child or anyone, even if it is an adult, I don't think there is any reason for someone to stop their education or stop their studies or stop their job or Supreme Court is very clear in its multiple judgments that only seizure or epilepsy is not a reason to take off anybody from a school or take off somebody from any organization just because they are epileptic. What do you want to say,
See,
Dr.
I
Sharma?
think we have to be more positive about this. There are a lot of achievers. There are a lot of intelligent people who had epilepsy and they have done wonders in the world. So please do not get carried away by either one fit or possibly a bunch of fits which happen over time or over years and lose the child or adult's scholastic performance. So definitely earlier medicines, yes, they would have had a effect on the learning ability, but now we have very good medications which make you in fact you won't even make out that patient. If you see 10 patients, I can definitely watch for that. If I make 10 people stand in front of you, you can't make out who is epileptic, who is not.
Yeah.
So that is the thing. So please do not get carried away, but at the same time they have to put a little more effort because they can't miss their sleep. Because most important thing is, if they miss their sleep, many times they get fits. So that's why we always tell them, you spend little more time, especially the evening hour, reduce time of socialization and other things. Try to make up your sleeping hours and lead a normal life. Please do not stop the education. Please continue. We hope that your sister's son does wonders.
Definitely. We wish him all the best, Ms. Swati. Pawan?
So the next question is from Mr. Bharat. My child is 3+ years, got seizures, maybe due to high fever, and fever stayed for more than 20 days. Got admitted hospital for about 15 days. I think he is requesting for your comment on this situation.
Yeah,
Febrile convulsions.
One is febrile convulsion. Second thing is looking at the story. It's almost 3 weeks history of fever with almost 2 weeks of hospitalization. One probability could be a brain fever with we call it as status epilepticus. We forgot to mention about status epilepticus, which is a true neurological emergency, which says that if patient continuously have fits for more than 5 minutes without any gain in the consciousness, then that patient has to be admitted in ICU. They have to be admitted, they have to put on ventilator and other things. Because this is a more of an individual question at this platform, it may not be wise to answer. I suggest that you please consult a nearby neurologist, wherever, whichever city you are. Please consult a neurologist. If you are in Bangalore, we are always ready for any help what you can definitely get. But let me assure that once the seizures come down, if there is no structural damage to the brain, if it is not because of a tumor or a stroke which can leave some disability, I think child should do well. Have a positive hope. Definitely, if you are in, I think, good hands wherever you are. So even if you have difficulty nearby, our Apollo hospitals are there across the country. Please take our consultants' help.
Absolutely. Nothing to worry because 2 or 3 weeks fever, I don't think there is anything to worry. Wish you all the best.
So the next question is from Zafar. How to rule out about the fits in school children? Is there any
See,
way?
school children, there are 2, 3 important comments what the teachers say. Sometimes, during looking at the blackboard, the teachers commonly say in parent-teachers meeting that your son is not focusing. Sometimes we talk to them but they look through us. They don't focus. They don't concentrate. Sometimes they have a lot of these blinking episodes. They are all different type of fits. Actually, there are 20 to 30 different type of fits. What you have seen is possibly tonic-clonic fits with unconsciousness, tongue bite and all that, which is a common form of fits. That's called major fits. But sometimes even staring looks, even doing this movement, lip smacking, all these are different type of fits. So any learning disability, suppose common thing is my son who is in 5th standard, he was studying very well, but last 1 month he has lost interest. Teacher says that he doesn't focus on the board. Sometimes he just drops like that, drops on the classroom desk. So these are all subtle signs. I'm not telling all these are related to fits. Some of them be related to the learning disability as well. But anything of this sort, please do not neglect. Go to a nearby neurologist, get the consultation, so they'll be able to help you.
And Mr. Bharat, also keep in mind that a lot of psychological issues in children,
Yes.
lot of attention-seeking,
Behavior.
in children, they manifest like seizures. We call it as collectively we call these disorders as pseudo seizures, and it is quite common in children, especially those children where there is a sibling and then there is the child feels that the parents are not giving enough attention to me because they are always with the younger sibling. So psychogenic seizures or pseudo seizures are also very commonly seen in children. Yeah, Pawan.
So the next question is from Mr. Chowdhury. I'm using medicine for 3 years, from 3 years,
Okay.
for seizures.
Okay.
With yoga, can I reduce my seizures?
See, yoga will definitely help in the overall improvement of the body. We strongly recommend that. But at the same time, medications are not a substitute to any other form of physical activity. So please ensure that you take medicines on time, because what we see is even if you miss one dose, the risk of having a seizure recurrence goes quite high. And if you miss at least 3 doses, the body levels of all the anti-epileptic medication comes down very drastically. So there is a huge risk of having recurrence of fits. So please do not stop any of the anti-epileptic medication. Please continue your yoga. But if you want to stop medication, please go to a nearby neurologist or neurosurgeon. Take their help. It is not that don't be under the impression that we give fits medicine for lifelong in all the patients. In some patients, we may give for 3 months, 6 months, up to 3 years. But stopping is also not sudden. We titrate, we reduce the medicine slowly, and we stop it over 3 to 4 months. It is not that we are stopping overnight. We are stopping over 3 to 4 months. So please, friends, please do not take that risk of stopping any medicine without doctor's advice. If you get admitted even for one breakthrough seizure, the treatment guideline says that your treatment duration goes by another 3 years, and you suffer the unnecessary pain of hospitalization and sometimes ICU care, and if you are not lucky, sometimes you may break your bone. So please do not do that.
Yes, absolutely. And one more advice from my side is that these medicines which we prescribe for seizures, suppose tomorrow you go to another doctor and he says that you have an infection and you have fever and you need to be put on antibiotics or something like that. Make sure that you always take your seizure medications. No matter what the other medicines are prescribed by whichever doctor, please remember one thing: don't stop your seizure medications at any cost. Suppose if you are undergoing a major surgery or in a situation where you are not able to take those medications, so please inform your doctor so that they will give injectable or injections medications, and it will take care. Why we are stressing on this point is that any kind of a stress, whether it is a fever, whether it is any kind of a illness, and on that you are not taking your anti-seizure medications, chances are that your seizure will worsen, and that will impact adversely on your the other problem for which you are getting treated. So please keep this also in mind.
So that's all, sir.
Yeah, Pawan.
So thank you for taking your valuable time and helping us understanding about seizures and fits. I'm very sure that the viewers would also have got all the questions answered from the specialist. If you still have any doubts, please leave in the comment sections. We will talk to the doctors and get back to you with the relevant answers.
Sure.
Thank you, one and all. Thank you, doctors.
Thank you.
Thank
Namaste.
you. Namaste.